Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you all. Thank you for co-creating this container of retreat we're in. Been in retreat for the weekend. Many of us, some of us have just arrived in this building very recently, or on this online convening. So I hope you like a little quiet time, because that's what we've got here. But if it seems a little too quiet, you could just come back next Sunday and it might be a little bit more social. And if you're like, oh, thank goodness, it's very quiet. Well, come back some other morning. Monday through Saturday, it tends to be pretty quiet. So I'm going to talk today about a little section in this book called Zen Echoes. Zen Echoes, classic koans with verse commentaries by 3 female Zen masters. I'm just going to read you a little bit from the introduction by Beata Grant, who is the translator of this text. This is a translation of a work that in Chinese is titled Songgu Heixiang Ji. That is undoubtedly pronounced incorrectly, but I try. The Concordant Sounds collection of verse commentaries. So the verses in this collection are from Miaozhong, Baoqi, and Zukui, 3 Chan nuns. Miaozhong is from about the 11th, 12th century, and Baoqi and Zukui from the 16th, 17th century. Miaozhong is famous for being one of the first officially recognized female Chan masters in Chinese history. She was also known for her literary talents as well as her religious achievements. What does that mean? And although much of her writing has been lost, many of her verse commentaries were preserved in a 14th century anthology of such verses. Over 500 years after Miaozhong's death, the 2 Dharma companions, Baoqi and Zukui, were so inspired by these verses that they each composed their own verse commentaries on the same koans originally commented upon by Miaozhong. These koans, together with the verse commentaries by all 3 women, were then compiled into a collection by the literatus official and Buddhist layman Zhang Daiyuan. So that's how this comes to us. Some women found these verses from 500 years ago, and we're like, hey, let's uphold these and let's interact with them. And then several hundred years later, Beata Grant found them and said, oh, let's uphold these and interact them through translation, which is a creative act. So I'm going to read the case. Oh, by the way, Chan nuns have been around for a long time. Chan being the Chinese word that is transliterated as Zen in Japanese, and so Zen, Chan are the same character, pronounced differently. We'll be having a Chan nun from China named Venerable Ding giving a Dharma talk here. She's going to stay here for a while in July and give a Dharma talk on July 10th, and I highly recommend you come for that. So here's the case. I talked about this quite a bit yesterday. My whole Dharma talk was just about the case yesterday. This is case 1 from this collection. One day, the world-honored one ascended the Dharma seat. When the great assembly had gathered and settled down, Manjushri struck his gavel and said, observe deeply the Dharma of the Dharma King. The Dharma of the Dharma King is like this. The world-honored one then came down from the seat. All right. So the world-honored one, that means Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha. Manjushri is the Bodhisattva of wisdom, or one of the Bodhisattvas of wisdom. Ascending the Dharma seat means you're going to give a talk So you get up on the seat and then you give a talk. But apparently that didn't happen on this occasion because when you hit the gavel, it means the talk is over. So the Buddha gets up to give a talk, and Manjushri goes, behold, the Dharma King of Dharma. The Dharma of the Dharma King of Dharma is like this. And then the world Dharma was like, okay, cool. That was easy. So I do not want to, you could talk about this case. Reams of ink and words have been spilled about it already. But you know, like many Zen koans, power is a central issue within the koan. Acknowledging that there's a power dynamic between the Buddha and Manjushri, and then it's inverted. Manjushri's like, oh, nice talk, pal. And Buddha's like, okay, I'll get down. That's complete. We don't really know what happened, but so we have this in there. Essentially, like almost all koans, it's about relationship and interaction, how two people are interacting in a given moment. And here, within the specific context of a Buddhist ritual, the ritual of giving a talk and of containing that talk together, and how they do that. They do it in a pretty unique way. It would be pretty weird. I got up here to give a talk, and Carrie was just like, thank you very much for attending the talk. Ding, I'm going to begin the announcements. Damn, what are you doing? But I would like to think that I could have a little bit of grace. Spontaneous responsiveness in such a situation. And, you know, the embodiment of the Dharma and the all-pervasiveness of the Dharma is probably the most obvious theme of this. Manjushri, instead of like, I'm going to explain something to you, somehow Manjushri and Buddha together say, the Dharma King is like this. Like this being like it is right now. Like it is right now. It's not somewhere else. But this is deeply related to the idea that what the Buddha does is embody the Dharma. So the Dharma is not a religious ideal that exists outside of one's embodied activity. It's just the Buddha is enacting the Dharma. So to do Buddha is to engage in activities that are conducive to liberation for all beings. And sometimes that might seem pretty confusing, but if we open our heart to that way of embodying life, something beautiful can happen. And back to the idea of relationality and relationship interaction, you got to behold. You have to behold the Buddha. Manjushri doesn't say, oh, the Buddha's over there. It's like, do the practice of beholding, of seeing the Dharma that's here. It's pretty easy, I have noticed over the last 2 days sitting in this Zendo doing like really very little. It's pretty easy to not behold the Dharma. It's pretty easy to like just be like, oh, wow. I didn't know a car stereo could be that loud. I just really learned something here. There have been some moments where it's just, oh, this is sound. Just a sound. It's beholding the completeness of what's here right now. Miaozong's comment. The true teaching has been transmitted in its entirety. No method, worldly or sacred, has been kept hidden. The prison gates shatter into 100 bits and pieces. The brilliance of flinty spark and lightning flash. I'll just read it again. The true teaching has been transmitted in its entirety. No method, worldly or sacred, has been kept hidden. The prison gates shatter into 100 bits and pieces. The brilliance of flinty spark and lightning flash. So, the case, one of the clearer themes is like, just look right now. This is the Dharma. No one has to explain it to you. That's like a very clear theme that runs throughout Zen literature, it runs through this koan, it runs through all these comments. But then when you read the verse, each character in the verse is laden with referential meaning. So you could write paragraphs and pages on oh, this is what she's referring to with that, and here's all the Buddhist literature that it taps into. So it's kind of funny. Zen literature tends to be like this. It's all about going beyond cultural forms and conditioning, and then it's completely thickly larded with cultural forms and conditioning. That seems to be how we do it. So a few years ago, I got to play charades with some people. It was like Thanksgiving weekend, and we're going to play charades. It was like all these families coming together that I grew up with. And the kids running around, because now we got, anyways, kids running around. Oh, we're going to play a game. Really fun. So we get up to play the game, and I'm going to make the cultural assumption that you know how charades works. And anyway, so my friend, Abby, got up, and she made this gesture which indicates she was going to talk about a TV show. I don't know what that is, but whatever. She does the TV show thing. And then she went like this, which means one word, I think. And then her wife said, "Girls!" And she said, "That's it." And then that turn was over. It was pretty brief. So how much shared cultural conditioning does there have to be for that to happen? I mean, we all had to know what a TV set was, which not everyone does. And then all the rules of the game, and then all the, what is that? Direct mind-to-mind transmission? So, intimacy is always available, and this koan invites us into an intimacy that is beyond, both completely connected to, not escaping, and within culture, but it's also beyond culture. Because we can't figure out exactly how that happened. TV one, girls. We don't know. It's beyond our ideas. So, Yongjong says the true teaching has been transmitted in its entirety. No method, worldly or sacred, has been kept hidden. So, this relates to the koan. It's like, just look, it's already here. Oddly, that can feel like something is being hidden from you, right? Because you're like, it doesn't look like it's here to me. What do you even mean by that? You're hiding something from me. No, I'm not trying to hide something from you. I'm trying to just help you notice that it's like this right now. Beyond ideas. And this is characteristic of the Zen school, this idea that teachings aren't hidden. So it's probably not an absolute truth, but in some Buddhist traditions, there's more of an emphasis on there are certain teachings that are only available to certain people, and you have very graded systems. Some Tibetan schools in particular are like this, where it's like you really aren't supposed to hear that thing until you're ready. I'm just curious, There may be someone in this Zoom meeting whose meeting is not muted. So you may just want to have a look and check if you're, there you go, I think you got it. Thank you. So, you know, being like, well, these teachings are really psychologically powerful, and they might be confusing or almost damaging to a person who's not really prepared for them. So you have graded systems, which can be really useful. And I've participated in training models that are like that, and it's cool. That's less emphasized in this tradition. That's one of the reasons you come to Dharma talks and you're like, I have no idea what that guy's talking about, because we're not grading it. We're just like, we're all going to jump in together. Now, hopefully we try and find a way so that people who are new can access something, and people who've been around for a long time can access something, because we're not all the same. The main reason for this emphasis is to say we don't have to wait. There's no waiting necessary. You're here. It's like this. The Dharma of the Dharma King of Dharma is like this. Like, oh, this feeling, this emotional state, this sound, that little squirrel running around in that tree. Good job, squirrel. Miaozhang writes, the true teaching has been transmitted in its entirety. No method, worldly or sacred, has been kept hidden. The prison gates shatter into 100 bits and pieces. Yeah. Prison gates. These teachings are about freedom. They're not about a freedom to do whatever you want. They're about a freedom from needing to do whatever you want. Our mind is like, I just want to do what I want. Half of that stuff doesn't help very much, or 72%, or maybe 98. I don't know, I'm no mathematician. But so much of what mind wants to do does not help. It's like, oh, I'm sitting here zazen. It would be very important for me to scroll through pages on a phone right now. I don't think so. Why do I want to do that? And there's so many wants. Yeah. Can I control that person? Can I get out of my life? Can I be somewhere else? Can I be someone else? Could you be someone else? Please! This isn't a freedom, that kind of freedom of getting what we want. It's freedom within just this momentary flux of reality to do things that are conducive to freedom for everyone from suffering. Freedom to just have some clarity about what would be good for the well-being of the world. And, you know, it's cool to try and get some clarity, but it's good to know we're going to be wrong most of the time. I certainly feel like I am. I'm just trying something. Is sitting here and practicing Zazen for hours at a time this weekend like the magical perfect thing? I have no idea. I have just enough faith to keep going. She closes her verse by saying, the brilliance of flinty spark and lightning flash, immediate. That's what we're talking about in this koan, is immediacy. The Dharma of the Dharma King of Dharma is not something you figure out later, or that someone can explain to you, or that maybe you can get when you're a good enough person, that you will get by improving yourself successfully. It's immediate. But it's ungraspable. You can't hold on to a lightning flash. You can't hold on to a spark. There's nothing held, nothing gettable. It's possible to feel like that's great. I don't have to get anything. How much? It's like life is so tiresome trying to get things all the time and realize there's nothing to get. But it can also feel, I know, a little like, but I kind of want to get something. Can they come here and tell me what to get? I get that. So these are radical and challenging teachings. And what's kind of funny here, though, is oftentimes the language of lightning sparks, flint sparks, lightning flashes, is to kind of remind us that the things we want to hold on to are unholdable. That's there's a lot of teachings that use those visual tropes to say, you can't hold on to anything. But this is like, it's awesome. It's awesome, like right now. It's like, you don't have to wait for 2 weeks. I mean, we had some pretty awesome lightning here on Wednesday night. We all had to go in the basement for our practice period meeting. And hopefully everyone was okay. But, it's stressful for some people. But the lightning flash, they're saying everything's like that. Instead of being like, oh, this is kind of boring. I'm just sitting here. It's more of these damn birds. Another loon. Just get up here in the morning and listen to loons. What if I can hear? That's a lightning flash. Wow. There's never going to be that same moment of whatever it isness. So, this koan and miaozong are just pointing us to immediacy. Immediacy. A lot of times we think like, well, I will get to immediacy when my mind stops doing all this ridiculous stuff it does all the time. That's already immediately happening. That's okay. That's okay. Anyway, within all the context of this discussion of immediacy, we have a teaching that we're engaging with that's carried to us by human beings over the course of probably 1,200 years. So the koan probably emerged in Chinese culture about 1,200 years ago, started to be kind of codified, and then Miaozong writes these verses, and then Baoqi and Zukui felt this kinship, this ancestor kinship. It's let's bring this forth. Hundreds of years later, Beata Grant says, this is really cool. Let's translate this. Share it with people, and now your consciousness is manifesting it in the form of me appearing to give a talk to you. Good job. How are you doing that? That's amazing. How are you making this talk happen? Thank you. So, ancestors, this is ancestral transmission. Miaozong refers to direct transmission, already direct transmitted. So, I'd like to just do a brief ancestor meditation before we start hearing from Baoqi and Zukui. So, if you like to sit a certain way while you meditate, you can do that. Many ways to engage in ancestor meditation. At MTMC on Saturday mornings, we recite the names of lineage holders and ancestors. Doing that for years. Long-standing Soto Zen tradition. And for this practice, just now, I encourage you to close your eyes. We will get to imagine things. So as I'm going to invite you to imagine particular kinds of ancestors from different aspects of our lineage. And as you do this, our relationships to people in the past can be complicated. I don't think there are people who haven't done harmful things. So in this particular practice, the idea is to emphasize that which is good, that which has been liberative, that these people who are our forebears practiced as an offering so that we can be here. So I just would like to start with Zen lineage. So you may have a lot of knowledge about people from our Zen lineage, and if so, you could just think of a figure or a few figures you find particularly inspiring. If you don't really know, you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, you've probably heard of Buddha. So you could just be like, oh, I know what a Buddha looks like on a statue. Just take a minute to picture some people from this tradition, Buddhist teachers. You maybe say their names in your mind. You can really let your mind do whatever it is that evokes some sense of this being and what they have offered to you. So picturing them, imagining them speaking, thinking about things that they have said or done that you find inspiring. And then just see if you can find some way to offer thanks and gratitude towards this person or people. And now let's just make this more personal, thinking about people from your own familial, could be hereditary, or it could be non-hereditary family, certainly. Just anyone that you would consider to be part of your family ancestors. Maybe just someone who is very supportive to you. And just bring them to mind in the same way, with maybe picturing them or thinking about them, whatever brings them into your heart and mind. And just see if you can find some way to offer some gratitude that they practiced living in a way that contributed to your well-being. And then lastly, let's just take a minute to think of people who are part of human culture, who have contributed to creating the culture that we live in a way that's beneficial. So ancestors within the heritage of human culture. With someone, maybe a couple people that you may feel appreciation for their offering. So, if we can offer some gratitude and appreciation to this person or these people, and now let's acknowledge that we are ancestors, that the future is there. We are people's ancestors, people unformed and unknown. Both as part of a Zen tradition, family, heritage, and cultural traditions. We are the future's ancestors. I'm going to invite you to practice Bhumi Sparsa, placing the right hand so it's touching the ground. Or your seat is fine. Just touching fingertips or the hand, feeling. The gesture that Buddha made on the seat of enlightenment, the Dharma king, is thus, like this. And I invite you to open your eyes and like to share in Gasho. So appreciating her ancestor Miaozhang, Baochi writes, a single eyelash in your eye, falling sky flowers, a single sound in your ear, a poison smeared drum. If you busy yourself with worries, you will never understand how beneath the gavel the bitter is separated from the sweet. A single eyelash in your eye, falling sky flowers. A single sound in your ear, poison smeared drum. If you busy yourself with worries, you will never understand how beneath the gavel the bitter is separated from the sweet. So I kind of feel like this would be easier if my friend Abby and her wife were here to interpret this particular charade, because it's hard to understand what she is talking about for me. There's a lot of shared information in there. As you get later into late Chan literature, it gets very, very referential. So I'm not going to unpack all of this here. But I will say the eyelash in your eye and falling sky flowers are just standard Mahayana images for delusion, for seeing things which aren't actually real. But I'm interested in the second line, a single sound in your ear, a poison-smeared drum. So the poison-smeared drum comes from a story in a sutra that says basically like, imagine someone put poison all over a drum and they hit it really hard, everyone in the audience would die. Oh, good. What? So you got to know that a lot of times in Chinese Chan literature, dying means waking up. Dying to our conditioned, provisional, habitual way of being, and waking up to the way things really are. So, but it's a kind of a startling logic. But the idea here is that the striking of that drum, like the striking of the gavel by Manjushri, is a way that everyone can be impacted all at once. Boom. There's an immediate connection. There's an inescapable connection. The sound is there. So the point of the poison-smeared drum is everyone is impacted. Everyone is impacted. So this has to do with the fact that what we do always matters. We do always matters. But we're talking here in this verse, a single sound in your ear, a poison-smeared drum. Every sound is Manjushri striking the gavel. Every sound you ever hear is an invitation to realize that the Dharma, king of Dharma, is like this. Right, that sounds pretty good, but I mean, this stuff, this busy mind and this heart that's all messed up, and yeah, it's like this. It's like this. How about some appreciation here? for like this. She says, if you busy yourself with worries, you will never understand. Well, I think probably most people here already feel that too much. It's like, I'm so tired of all my worries. But you know, the thing is, we busy ourselves with our worries. It is possible to create the conditions where we're not busying ourselves with it. It's like, oh, worries. Oh, look at you guys. Oh, look at that. Look at springtime just happening. Wow. So I busy myself with my worries. I notice they're happening and then I just keep going. We have some agency in how we direct our energy. I know that you're like, yeah, well, I've been sitting here all weekend and my mind is very busy and worrying. Now, that's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It's just an encouragement to remember that we have power. We can try something just right now, like worrying. Oh, but listen to that. Sounds. Okay. Zukwi. Bauchi's colleague Zukwi writes, a lightning-like stratagem that confuses both men and gods. A single blow smashes it to bits, suffusing the world with light. Great wisdom can seem foolish. Great skill can seem clumsy. And even Gautama Buddha had to learn how to train his unruly mind. The elephant's carriage proceeds along the road with slow dignity. How could a praying mantis even think of stopping its advance? In front of a crowd of hundreds, his lips curved up in a smile, he conveys the teaching directly without lodging it in words. So I just really appreciate that apparently this is confusing to not just me. A lightning-like stratagem confuses both men and gods. So she says men and gods, she's probably like, I'm a woman, I'm outside of that framework. I gotta figure it out. I don't know. I don't know where she's at. But yeah, it's confusing. We don't know. Was Buddha like, what are you doing, man? You just hit the gavel. I didn't even say anything. Was that confusing? We don't know. Was the audience like, what just happened? We don't know. Was Manjushri just like, did he give a talk or not? I better hit the bell. I had never thought of that interpretation. That's my favorite. You have that feeling like, did I say that out loud? Yeah. So in the second line, they refer to the elephant's carriage proceeding along the road with slow dignity. So, elephants represent many things, and they don't have to represent anything. When you see an elephant, you know something's happening. Whoa, that's an elephant. It's like Katagiri talking about like seeing a moose, and just being like, it wasn't anything, it was just moose. So represent something, but beyond representation. All at once. But anyway, Samantabhadra, elephants often represent Samantabhadra, the bodhisattva of compassionate action, of agency, being in the world, doing stuff. This is the bodhisattva that underlines the teachings of the Avatamsaka Sutta. All the variety of ways in which beings can engage in activities that are liberative, that lead to freedom from suffering. So I was like, the elephant, slow dignity. Yeah. So that's the thing. It's like, if I start thinking about like, yeah, everybody has liberative power, isn't that, I think people go, oh my gosh, I got to do a whole bunch of stuff. That's not the idea. That's not the idea here. How do we awaken a sense of our agency as beings who can do something without turning it into something frantic, or waiting for something else to be achieved, or waiting for ourselves to be good at doing that kind of thing? How can we just be like, right now, just being with you? Amazing. Amazing. How is this happening? Come on. Can you believe this is happening? I can only believe it because it's so immediately evident in my senses. So then there's this great image, a praying mantis. The praying mantis, how could it stop the great chariot? How could a praying mantis even think of stopping its advance? So I was glad we had footnotes. So apparently somewhere in the sutra literature, there's this scene where a praying mantis gets up in front of an oncoming elephant and is like, you gotta stop! And is waving its arms around. I've been that praying mantis. The world is just happening. You're like, you gotta stop! Wow. And you read the news. Ah! You're not gonna stop the news. You're not gonna stop the news. But what's beautiful, there's so many inversions, relentless inversions, flippings in this. What a praying mantis thinks it can do is stop the inexorable, dignified progression of liberation in the form of an elephant. Wow. You think maybe you can mess up liberation? The Dharma is already correctly transmitted. The Dharma of the Dharma King of Dharma is like this. This, this body, this heart, this mind, this sound, this sight, this smell, this taste. You know, Dr. King wrote, the arc of the universe bends towards justice. And I think Martin Luther King is an amazing philosopher and certainly an incredible, has done some things for liberation for human beings that are amazing. But actually, this is one of the things I naturally agree with the least. I have no idea what the arc of the universe is doing, personally. But he's a pretty smart guy. And I gotta say, it really resonates with this praying mantis that thinks, somehow I'm gonna stop the slow, dignified march of liberation embodied in this elephant. Have some trust. Have some trust. And not a trust that's like, oh, well, then never mind, I don't have to do anything. It's like, get that praying mantis, got to get in the parade. Walking down, do its praying mantis thing next to the elephant. That praying mantis matters. It's part of the whole thing. Part of the whole thing. And lastly, Zukwi ties this back to a very similar koan, which is the koan where the Buddha teaches by just holding up a flower and transmits the Dharma to Mahakashapa through this gesture. And it doesn't really transmit it, it's mutually transmitted through the smile of Mahakashapa at the sight of the flower. I recommend the practice of walking around and smiling at flowers. This is the time of year for doing it. In front of a crowd of hundreds, his lips curved up in a smile, he conveys the teaching directly without lodging it in words. Who conveyed it? Was it Mahakashapa who smiled? Buddha who smiled? Can you convey the teaching just by smiling? I think so. I think so. So, I hope, if nothing else, this talk is an encouragement to listen. Just these sounds, the sounds of the cries of the world, the sounds of the cries of our own aching, awakening hearts. As complete. Just the listening is complete. Thank you. Let's see. So I think I will do the thing I sometimes do during retreat. Oftentimes during retreat, we don't invite questions and comments, and I think I'll go with that today. I'll just say dialogue is amazing, and we do lots of dialogic things here, but during retreat, it's like, So you can listen to your heart, but talk to your friends if you're not on retreat. If you're on retreat, we get to hang out and listen to birds. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you all for coming today. I'm going to